If I'm being honest, I didn't even want to go to that party. It was one of those overly formal, thinly disguised networking events disguised as a birthday celebration. Rachel had mentioned it a few days prior, saying something like, "My boss is throwing a birthday thing, kind of mandatory. You can come if you want." Not exactly the most romantic invitation, right? Still, we'd been off lately. Quieter dinners, more time on our phones, fewer spontaneous touches, and I figured maybe showing up would be a good move. Supportive partner, present boyfriend, all that. So I told her sure I'd come. Her reaction wasn't negative, just hesitant, like she hadn't expected me to say yes. The event was at the ArcLight Hotel downtown, which was already a red flag to me. It's one of those overly sleek places with warm-toned LED lighting and staff who look like they're auditioning for a Netflix show. Way too fancy for a boss's birthday unless something else was going on. But I chalked it up to corporate excess. When we got there, Rachel immediately slipped into social mode, except it wasn't the version of her I knew. She barely acknowledged me once we stepped into the ballroom. I don't mean that figuratively. I mean I may as well have been her Uber driver. "No, this is my boyfriend Daniel." No hand on my back. No, "Glad you came." I watched her glide across the floor, her red dress hugging just tight enough to make an impression. She wasn't being flirtatious in a cartoonish way, it was more subtle, polished, intentional. She made her rounds, glass of white wine in hand, offering smiles and light touches on sleeves, all while never once making eye contact with me. What really got me, though, was how she hovered around her boss, Zach. I'd met him once before. One of those guys who gives you a firm handshake and then immediately turns to the more important people in the room. He was charismatic in a networking bro kind of way. Expensive watch, loud laugh, strong cologne. I didn't like him. Rachel had always spoken about him in vaguely admiring tones. Zach just gets things done. Or, Zach's style is brutal but effective. That kind of talk. That night, the space between her and Zach was about 6 inches closer than what you'd expect between a boss and a subordinate. She stood angled toward him, always slightly smiling, nodding just a bit too much. I tried not to read into it, but the unease was growing like a slow leak under the floorboards. About 30 minutes in, something strange happened. I was getting myself another drink. Whiskey? Neat. When I spotted one of Rachel's coworkers, someone I didn't know, bend down near the drinks table and come up holding a cream-colored envelope. The guy glanced around, then held it out to Rachel. "Hey, I think you dropped this." She froze for half a second. That moment stretched. Then she took it with an overeager laugh, like she was trying too hard to make it casual. "Oh yeah, that's mine," she said quickly, stuffing it into her clutch without looking inside. But I saw her eyes flick to the front of the envelope. I caught a glimpse too. Handwritten across it were the words, "Room 507 Saturday only." Not a company logo. Not a generic voucher. Not something you'd give out to employees in bulk. I waited a beat, trying to process what I'd just seen, and then I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "What was that?" She barely glanced at me. "Just a company gift card," she said, forcing a smile so brittle I swear it cracked in the middle. "Really?" I said slowly. "Company gift cards usually don't say Room 507 on them." She whipped her head toward me, her smile gone in an instant. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" she snapped. "At my work event? I'm just asking," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "Why would you need a hotel room when we live 15 minutes away?" She narrowed her eyes at me, her voice sharp and low. "You're being paranoid." I raised an eyebrow. "Am I? I can't believe this," she said, turning away and downing what was left of her wine. "God, you always do this when I'm trying to be professional. Just stay out of it, Daniel. Please." And with that, she walked away. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Not because of what she said, but how easily she said it. Like she had already rehearsed it. Like she'd been waiting for me to ask. I walked back toward the edge of the room, parked myself near a potted plant, and just observed. She didn't come back to check on me. Didn't even glance my way. Instead, she positioned herself along the far wall near the catering setup. Alone, but not really. She was scanning the crowd like she was waiting for someone. Her posture was tense, jaw tight, one foot slightly angled toward the exit. She didn't talk to anyone, just stood there, sipping her drink, clutching her clutch, the same one she'd slipped that envelope into, and checked her phone every few minutes like she was tracking something. I caught her glancing at the entrance more than once. Each time, she'd quickly look away and pretend to adjust her dress or check her phone. That kind of fidgeting doesn't happen unless someone's late or expected. I stood there another 15 minutes, watching. She never made a move toward me, never gestured for me to come over. Eventually, I walked over to grab a glass of water, and even then, she turned her back like she didn't want to be seen standing with me. I told myself maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe it really was a gift card. Maybe there was a team raffle or giveaway I didn't know about. But I've worked enough events, seen enough people lie with a smile. That wasn't workplace behavior. That was cover-up behavior. And I'd seen it before in other people in other relationships. You don't forget that look. At one point, she laughed at something Zach said, touching his arm briefly. Not in a lingering way, but with a kind of practiced int asterisk Macy. Like it wasn't the first time. He smiled down at her, then checked his watch and gave a subtle nod, the kind you give when something's on schedule. I took a sip of my drink and tried to breathe through the rising tension in my chest. I felt like an outsider in a movie I didn't audition for. Just some extra who stumbled into the wrong scene. Eventually, I made my way to the coat check, pulled out my phone, and scrolled mindlessly. I wasn't even reading anything, just needed something to look at that wasn't her. When I glanced up again, she was still in the same corner, clutch still in hand, posture like a soldier waiting for a cue. She wasn't waiting for a client. She wasn't networking. She was waiting for someone. And I had a sinking feeling it wasn't me. The night of the party didn't end with a confrontation. I didn't demand an answer. I didn't raise my voice or storm out. Instead, I played my part. Smiled when someone made a bad joke. Shook hands. Took a mini cheesecake square from the tray and pretended I could taste it. But something in me had shifted. That quiet, irreversible click when your gut finally gets the memo your heart's been ignoring. Rachel didn't notice, or maybe she did and just didn't care. When we left, she was quiet and I didn't push. The car ride home was filled with empty silence, punctuated only by the sound of her fingers tapping out a text. She said it was her coworker Amy, but she tilted the screen away when I glanced over. She didn't kiss me goodnight that evening, just mumbled something about being tired and disappeared into the bathroom. I lay awake longer than I should have, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment the envelope changed hands, over and over. And that look, that momentary flicker of panic before she masked it. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened, like we hadn't stood in the middle of a ballroom, unraveling in slow motion. She offered me toast, asked if I needed anything from the store. I watched her stir her coffee, calm and casual, and all I could think about was how long she'd been living in the split reality. One for me, one for whoever was waiting in room 507. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. I really did. But then I started remembering things. Little things. Like the new phone password she set a couple of months ago. I'd asked her why, and she brushed it off, saying it was a new work policy. IT's cracking down. At the time, I didn't argue. Made sense, right? But after that, her phone might as well have been a vault. Always locked, always screened down, never left unattended. Before that, she used to leave it on the nightstand when she showered. Now, it followed her everywhere, even into the bathroom. Especially into the bathroom. That's when the late-night client calls started. I'd hear her voice, low and hushed, behind the closed door. One night, I caught a single sentence that still plays in my head. "He's asleep. I can talk freely now." She said it softly, like she didn't want to be overheard. And she was right, I wasn't supposed to hear it. I didn't confront her. I told myself there could be 100 innocent explanations. Maybe it was about a sensitive project. Maybe she meant one of her clients was asleep. I tried so hard to believe the best in her that I convinced myself I misheard. But I didn't. I started noticing other shifts. Our routines changed. We used to do groceries together, made it our Sunday thing. Lately, she always had an excuse. I already stopped by on the way home, or I just ordered online this week. First, I appreciated the thought. But then I started seeing things in the fridge that neither of us had ever eaten. Soy yogurt. She hates soy. Protein bars with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. Fancy, imported mineral water from New Zealand. When I asked her about it, she waved it off. It was a substitution. Instacart messed up the order. But it kept happening. Items she never bought before suddenly showing up week after week. Nutrition-focused snacks. Stuff that screamed gym guy. Not my girlfriend who joked about how kale tastes like punishment. Once I made a passing joke. Something like, "Did we get a third roommate who only eats chia seeds and sparkling rainwater?" She laughed. A little too hard. Then changed the subject. Even her scent started to change. I don't mean perfume. I mean the actual smell of her clothes. Some nights she'd come home with this faint, unfamiliar cologne lingering on her jacket. Not mine. Not something I could place. At first, I thought maybe it was someone she hugged goodbye or brushed past in the elevator. But it kept happening. And it wasn't random. It was always strongest on Saturdays. When I asked about it gently, she smirked. "Are you sniffing my clothes now?" She played it off like I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was. But it felt like asking someone why their car keeps parking in a different driveway and being told, "Oh, just exploring the neighborhood." She started disappearing on weekends. Not all of them, just 1 or 2 per month. She'd say it was a last-minute client meeting or a team-building thing. Always vague. Never details. Once, I asked if she wanted company. I could tag along, grab a coffee nearby. She immediately shut it down. "It's just boring stuff," she said. "Besides, it'll be awkward. These are client negotiations, not a brunch hang." And again, I let it slide. Because that's what trust does. It hands you a blindfold and says, "Here, just keep walking." But then one weekend, while she was at the office, I opened Google Maps on the iPad we used for streaming. Not to check on her, not exactly. I just tapped the location history out of habit. I wish I could say I was surprised by what I found. She wasn't near her office. She wasn't even downtown. She was across the river, in a quiet warehouse district we'd only ever driven through on our way to the farmer's market. The pin dropped near a building labeled Loft District Collective. I Googled it. It was a private club, members only, low-key events, luxury short-stay apartments. Private, exclusive, discreet. My stomach dropped. I didn't mention it. I stared at the pin on the map for 20 straight minutes, telling myself there had to be another explanation. She got lost. She met someone there for lunch. The app glitched. But that's the thing about suspicion. Once it takes root, everything becomes a clue. That night, I noticed she'd changed her hair. Just barely. A subtle wave that hadn't been there before. She never mentioned a salon. Just said she used a different conditioner. She smiled, kissed me goodnight, and curled into bed like everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sleeping next to someone I didn't know anymore. Even the way she spoke changed. Shorter sentences. Less detail. Her texts used to have emojis, inside jokes, little quirks that made them feel like her. Now they read like formal memos. Running late. Don't wait up. Client moved our meeting. Be home after 10. Busy day. Exhausted. If I asked questions, she'd get defensive. Once I said, "Everything okay? You've been really tired lately." She**T back. "I'm sorry. Am I not allowed to be tired now?" I backed off. Again. And that's what scares me most in hindsight, how often I backed off. How often I convinced myself that being supportive meant ignoring my instincts. How easily I let her rewrite the narrative over and over, while I just held the pen and nodded. There was one moment, 2 weeks before the party, that I keep returning to. We were watching TV, something mindless. I looked over at her and caught her smiling at her phone. It wasn't just any smile. It was that half-shy, half-excited expression people make when they feel wanted, desired, loved. When she noticed me watching, she turned the screen face down and asked if I wanted popcorn. She didn't know I saw her type, I miss you too. That should have been it. That should have been the moment I confronted her. Asked the hard questions. Ripped the blindfold off. But I didn't. I told myself I was tired. Told myself I misread it. Told myself 1,000 lies to avoid facing one truth. I was losing her. Or maybe I'd already lost her, and I was just now starting to notice. By the time Tuesday rolled around, I was a shell of myself. I couldn't focus at work. Couldn't eat much. Couldn't sleep. I was moving through my days like a ghost. Still showing up, still smiling when I needed to, but barely holding it together inside. Rachel had texted me that morning to say she'd be home late. Something about an inventory check that was supposed to run until 10. I stared at the message for a long time, watching the typing bubbles come and go as she crafted it. It read too clean, too packaged, like she wasn't talking to me but managing me. Something in my gut finally snapped. A quiet line I'd been tiptoeing for weeks just broke. I'd spent too long wondering, doubting, letting her deflections steer the story. I needed the truth, not a gut feeling, not another red flag, real undeniable truth. So I followed her. Not immediately. I waited. I pretended to settle into the evening, turned off the lights, cracked a beer, just enough to give her a head start. Then I grabbed my keys, slid into my car, and pulled out slow, headlights off until I was half a block from home. She didn't go to the office. She didn't even take the route that led toward it. Instead, she took a series of side streets, winding her way through the city like someone trying to avoid detection. No traffic, no radio, just her brake lights flickering ahead of me like a metronome counting down to something I didn't want to see. After about 20 minutes, she pulled into a small, high-end block downtown, tucked between some high-rise condos and a dry cleaner that looked permanently closed. The building she parked near had no signage, just a sleek silver plaque that read, Pure Element Loft. I recognized the name. I'd passed it once with a coworker who'd pointed it out. That's the place for off-the-record meetings, if you know what I mean. Fully private, furnished lofts. No front desk, just keypads. She parked and didn't linger. No calls, no hesitation. She grabbed her coat, checked her lipstick in the mirror, and walked inside like she'd done it a dozen times before. I stayed in my car, parked further down the street. Lights off, heart racing. For a moment I questioned everything. Maybe she was here for a surprise. Maybe it was part of a client pitch. Maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. But I wasn't. Because a few minutes later, a figure stepped out of a black SUV and walked through the same door. Zach, her boss. Same perfectly tailored blazer. Same smug, confident posture. He didn't look around. Didn't hesitate. Just typed in a code, and the door clicked open. I waited 10 seconds. Then I got out. The building had tall second-floor windows with sheer curtains, just enough to blur details but still reveal silhouettes. I walked along the sidewalk slowly, trying to stay calm, telling myself I wasn't about to see what I knew I was going to see. And then I did. I saw them. There she was, Rachel, inside the loft, standing near the window. She wasn't talking business. She wasn't flipping through charts. She was smiling. At him. Zach was close to her. Closer than a boss should ever be. His hand went to her face. A small touch, soft. Her eyes fluttered shut, like she was melting into it. And then they kissed. It wasn't quick. It wasn't a greeting. It was the kind of kiss people give when they know each other, when there's history behind it, when it's not the first time. I stood there frozen, staring through the curtain like I'd slipped out of my own body. Everything around me felt muted, distant, like watching someone else's life crumble. I didn't take a video, couldn't, but I did raise my phone and take one photo, just enough to capture them. Their shadows against the soft lights inside, her hand resting on his chest like she belonged there. And that was it. That was all the truth I needed. I didn't go home that night. I didn't text her, didn't call, didn't give her the chance to twist the narrative one more time. I drove aimlessly for a while, through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past gas stations and 24-hour diners, windows down even though it was cold. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to feel something besides the tight, crushing weight pressing down on my chest. Eventually, I called my friend Leo. I didn't even tell him why, just asked if I could crash at his place. He said yes, no questions. I spent the night on his couch, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click every time it rotated, trying to wrap my head around what I'd seen. She kissed him. That kiss meant something. And everything else. Every suspicion, every lie, every vanished Saturday, clicked into place like a puzzle I hadn't wanted to solve. The next morning, I left Leo's place early and drove back home just after sunrise. The streets were still empty. The world felt too calm for what was unraveling in mine. Rachel was already up when I got there. She looked surprised, almost guilty, when I walked in. But then she smiled. That same polished, practiced smile she used at the party. "Hey," she said lightly, as if nothing had happened. "Rough night." I didn't answer. I walked past her into the kitchen, set my keys on the counter, and pulled out a bouquet of flowers I'd picked up on the drive back. Not because I believed in pretending, but because I wanted her to. She blinked, clearly confused. "Are those for me?" I nodded, still saying nothing. Her voice wavered. "You okay?" I handed her the flowers, kissed her forehead, then walked into the living room and sat down like it was a normal morning. She hovered by the doorway for a moment. Her face was pale, nervous, like she was trying to figure out what I knew and how much I'd seen. But I didn't give anything away. Not yet, because now I had what I needed. The truth wasn't a theory anymore. It was a photograph, a timestamp, a memory that couldn't be rewritten. And soon she'd have to face it. The irony of betrayal is that once the truth is in your hands, literally in mine, in the form of a photo, it doesn't make the pain easier. It just makes it impossible to ignore. And yet, I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even confront her that day. I went quiet. It wasn't a plan. It was instinct. Something inside me shifted from hurt to stillness. Part of me detached. Like I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and now, finally, I was letting go. But not to yell. To observe. Rachel didn't know what I'd seen. Not yet. That morning, after I gave her the flowers, I watched her closely. She didn't know what to do with them. Accepted them with trembling fingers, then set them gently on the table like they might explode. She was confused, nervous, maybe even suspicious of my sudden calm. But I could see her trying to act normal, trying to regain control. "I didn't hear you come in last night," she said softly. "Wasn't home," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Had a lot on my mind." She nodded slowly, waiting for more. I gave her nothing. That was the start of my silence. Over the next few days, I stopped asking questions. No more "how was your day?" or "who were you texting?" I just let her talk if she wanted to. I stopped reacting. And that scared her more than any accusation could have. She began to shrink in the space between us. Little things changed. She flinched when I walked into the room unexpectedly. She turned her phone screen downward more aggressively, like hiding it harder would make a difference now. Once, I caught her checking my expression while pretending to scroll through her texts. Watching me from the corner of her eye like I was a puzzle she could no longer solve. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of breaking down. Not yet. 3 days after the loft, I left a note on the kitchen table. Just 8 words. "You don't have to pretend anymore." I know. I didn't sign it, didn't timestamp it, just left it by the coffee maker, where she'd find it first thing in the morning. Then I went for a long walk, no destination in mind. Just needed to be away from the house when it hit her. By the time I got back, she was gone. No text, no call. But that silence said more than anything. It wasn't until late that night that she reached out. I was lying on the couch, lights off, staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. Then came the texts. "Rachel, can we talk? Rachel, please. Rachel, I don't know what you mean by the note. If this is about the party. Rachel, Daniel, I'm scared. Rachel, I didn't mean to hurt you. Rachel, please don't do anything rash. We can fix this. Rachel, we have to talk." The desperation built slowly. It started with confusion, then softened into regret, then bloomed into panic. She knew the game was over. She just didn't know how I'd play my hand. I didn't respond. Not right away. I let the silence hang like a guillotine over her carefully curated life. She came home the next morning looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was unbrushed, eyes red and puffy, skin blotchy. She walked through the front door like someone returning from a war zone. "Daniel," she said softly, stepping into the living room, where I sat drinking coffee like nothing had happened. "I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to," I said. She blinked. I need to explain. It's not what it looks like." I almost laughed. That line. The classic script. How many people before her had said those exact same words, thinking they could soften the blow of a reality they chose to create. But I didn't laugh. I just looked at her, steady and quiet, and said, "You kissed him." She froze. Her breath caught. I watched the blood drain from her face like I'd spoken a curse. I didn't need to say how I knew. Didn't need to pull out the photo. That one sentence did all the work. She started, but nothing came after that. Just silence. "You didn't flinch," I continued. "He touched your face, and you leaned into it." Rachel sat down slowly, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. She folded in on herself, shoulders hunched, hands knotted together in her lap. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she whispered. "I believe that," I said. "But you let it." A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, like maybe she could undo it if I didn't see. "I've been unhappy for a while," she admitted. "At work, at home. I didn't know how to say it." "So you said it to someone else," I replied. She winced. "It wasn't serious. Not like that. I swear we didn't." I held up a hand. "I don't need the details. Not anymore." That part stunned her more than anything. No interrogation. No dramatic demands. Just stillness. "What do you want me to do?" she asked after a long pause. "What happens now?" I looked her in the eye. "Now, you sit with what you've done." And I got up, walked out of the room, and left her sitting there in the silence she created. After that day, everything shifted. She stopped pretending. No more late work events. No more half-hearted attempts at small talk. For the first time in years, Rachel looked like she didn't know how to move forward. And I didn't offer her a roadmap. Instead, I started preparing for the end. I backed up our shared drive, collected my documents, talked to a lawyer friend just casually at first. I needed to know my options before anything official. Rachel noticed my quiet distance and started spiraling. She cooked more dishes she hadn't made in years. She lit candles in the evening, played our old playlist in the background like a desperate soundtrack. None of it worked. The truth was too loud now. Then came her breakdown. One night, about a week after I left the note, she broke. She came into the living room while I was reading and just collapsed at my feet, sobbing so hard her words came out in pieces. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said between gasps. "I messed everything up. I ruined us. I know that. I don't know how to go back." "You can't," I said gently. "There is no going back." Her sobs slowed, then stopped. She looked up at me with red eyes and whispered, "Do you hate me?" I took a long breath before answering. "No, but I don't trust you, and that's worse." That's when she finally understood. Not because I yelled. Not because I threw her things out the window or demanded confessions. But because I didn't need to. Because I had already let her go. The emotional betrayal was enough. More than enough, honestly. But it turned out Rachel hadn't just dismantled our relationship. She'd quietly taken a wrecking ball to parts of my life I hadn't even thought to protect. It started as a habit, something I did without thinking. One morning, maybe a week after the confrontation, I logged into our shared bank account. It wasn't suspicion that brought me there, just routine. We used to manage everything together: bills, savings, the occasional vacation fund. That was how our relationship had been built. Teamwork. But when the numbers loaded, my stomach dropped. Nearly $9,000 was missing from our joint savings. It wasn't completely empty, but it might as well have been. And what was worse, the withdrawals weren't labeled in a way that made any sense. Greenlee Project Consulting. Ecotrans Transaction. GP. Invoice 1,327 inch. At first, I thought maybe it was something for her work. Some new side hustle I didn't know about. But then I noticed something that made the back of my neck go cold. My name. On one of the linked documents, an invoice pulled from our digital folder, it listed Daniel H. Lowell as the primary consultant. Except I never signed anything. And I don't do consulting. I opened the document and stared. My old business logo, one I hadn't used in 3 years, was at the top. My full license number was at the bottom, and my digital signature was right there in neat blue ink. It wasn't a logo ripped from the internet or an amateur mock-up. This was mine. Something she must have pulled from an old file or backup. Rachel had set up a fake consulting business using my credentials. I sat there, heart pounding, barely able to think. She hadn't just lied about a kiss or a hotel room. She'd taken pieces of me, my name, my degree, my work, and used them to build a front. For what? Money? Appearance? Control? I clicked deeper into the folder. There were contracts with fake email addresses, some using a variation of my old work domain. I hadn't used that address in years. I'd let the website lapse, but someone had re-registered it. A new version. Slightly altered. Greenlee Pro Consulting. Com instead of Greenlee Pro Consulting. Com. A subtle difference. One I might never have noticed if I wasn't looking carefully. And then I saw the client list. Some were companies I recognized, startups in the sustainability space. Others were LLCs with barely any web presence. The money wasn't flowing from one place, but many. Small amounts. $1,500 here. $2,000 there. But over months it had added up. $9,000. Gone. My name. Used. My license. On file. This wasn't just dishonesty. This was fraud. And the worst part? If one of those clients ever decided to file a complaint, or the licensing board got wind of it, it wouldn't land on her desk. It would land on mine. My name was on the documents. My professional identity. My legal liability. I sat in the quiet of our shared home. The same home where we'd once painted walls together and argued over cabinet hardware. Staring at a screen that made my skin crawl. I didn't yell. Didn't even feel angry yet. I felt violated. All I could think was, how far did she expect to go before I found out? I printed every document I could find. Every receipt. Every contract. Every modified invoice. I compiled them into a folder and stored a backup on a flash drive I locked in my desk. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when Rachel had started seeing me not as a partner, but as a platform, a resource, a mask. She didn't come home that night. I didn't ask where she was. At this point, it didn't matter. The next morning, I waited for her in the kitchen. When she walked in, still wearing her blazer from the day before, I slid the folder across the table. She stared at it like it was radioactive. What's this? I didn't speak. I just sat back and watched her open it. Watched her eyes scan the pages. Watched the slow, creeping horror spread across her face as it all clicked. You went through the account? That's what you're leading with? I asked. That I went through the account? I can explain. No, you can't, I said. You forged my name. You used my license. You built an entire business in my name without telling me. It wasn't a business, she said quickly. Like that made it better. It was a temporary project. Zach had a few clients who needed consulting, and your name gave it legitimacy. There it was. Zach. Again. She kept talking, fast and desperate. It wasn't malicious. I thought if we got it going, maybe I could make some money on the side. Help us. And yeah, okay, I used your stuff, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. You forged my signature, I said. You used a domain that looks like my old business. You signed actual contracts in my name. Do you have any idea how illegal that is? Her mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. You used me, I said finally. Not just emotionally, professionally. You risked my career so you could pad your side hustle with your affair partner's clients. She flinched. I could see it now, the whole arc. Zach provides the clients. Rachel does the talking. I provide the name, the credentials, the safety net. Perfect front as long as I never checked the books. Except now I had. I'm reporting this, I said. To my lawyer. To the licensing board. To whoever I need to. She stared at me, stunned. Daniel, come on. This doesn't have to go that far. It already has. I can fix it. No, I said. You can't. You made your choices. I'm just making mine now. And then I stood up. I left the folder on the table. Her hands trembled as she touched it, like maybe she could will it out of existence. But she couldn't. It was all real. And the fallout was just beginning. I sent the documents to my lawyer and filed a report with the licensing board. Then I found Zach's wife and emailed her the photo with one line. You deserve to know. Days later, Rachel was fired. Her fake firm collapsed. Zach was investigated. Contracts froze. Her final text said, You ruined my life. But I hadn't. She did. I just turned on the light. The court ruled in my favor. House, assets, license intact. Her fraud was official. When she came to collect her things, she looked lost. No yelling, just silence. She tried to paint me as cold, but the records told the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, peaceful. She had left long before I closed the door. Now I was finally free.